Did you also pick up Slay the Spire after seeing all the praise around it and then start craving even more roguelike deck building goodness? Well, hopefully here I can show you something you may not have heard of yet, and we'll see if they're worth it or not. First up, we have a demo prologue for the upcoming game Die in the Dungeon, a deck builder where your deck is not full of cards but dice. This Steam version of the game builds off the original itch.io version with added features like relics and more dice types. Similar to having different card types, each colour die has different properties: red for attack, blue for defense, purple to boost, and green to heal. You place dice on the board, and where you end up putting them can change other areas around them. I quite liked this mechanic, as at first I didn't really get why there were so many slots on the board, but once the boost die came into play, I started to see how powerful and fun it could be. The value of the die not only makes some die more powerful like the attack and defend ones, but for the boost ones it changes where it may be best to place other dice on the board. I think overall I'm always a sucker for nice pixel art, and going into this game was really no exception. I really liked the enemy designs and the general look and feel of the board. But oh, aren't you cute? Look at you. To add a small complexity and choice to each turn, some enemies can place things onto the dice board blocking you from certain actions. It was good to see this, and I do hope for more enemies later on to have even harsher or different ways to interact with the board, as it would certainly make things a bit more tactical and different each run. The roguelike mechanic of getting artifacts that really can change your run will always be a very addicting factor for me, as I found out again plenty of times during this demo. There are no attack die on the board at the end of your turn. Deal 2 damage to all enemies. Oh, attack dice cost 0 energy and get +1 to their value. The target will get randomly chosen. Oh, you can no longer change. I always hope with roguelikes that artifacts and cards or items that are picked up throughout a run really do make decent changes to your gameplay, as it's certainly a pitfall some fall down that can make runs feel far too similar. The boosting action really can make you feel overpowered with how much boosting it can allow. With a boost of 2, putting it in the middle slot and then having +2 on so many other slots really made me feel like a tactical genius. I know it was just a demo for showing off the gameplay, but I do hope the main game was a bit more challenging, as by the end of the demo I was starting to get a bit of a god complex. The mechanics for the boss fight within the demo were really fun too. You'd have different slots on the board to be able to attack the Scorpion Rider themselves, and then stunning both of them when the rider hit 0. You'd then be able to deal triple damage to the Scorpion, which was pretty satisfying. I hope the further bosses in the full game get unique mechanics for them like this one did, as it did feel really nice. I'm definitely really looking forward to the full game of this now, and I may even go back and play the itch.io version just to scratch that itch a little bit. I really like it when roguelikes play into the fact of the repeating nature of themselves, and even better when it becomes part of the story, like in Hades where each attempt to escape progresses and changes things in between runs. Our next game, Cobalt Core, has the characters already aware that they're in a time loop and already on loop 518. This then has you beating each run to try and uncover what's happened to them. The story, including the gameplay loop, really helps me want to continue playing after each run finishes, as it's nice to have something to work towards rather than just more unlocks. The combat in this game is that you're in a spaceship fighting other ships and obstacles, and each card can help you move around, attack enemies, provide your ship with defences, or launch projectiles like drones or asteroids, all within a horizontal playing field. You get a crew of fun characters to help run your ship, each one bringing you a specialisation in attacks, shields, manoeuvring, and among other things. It was a fun system to have, as not only did you get to see different dialogue depending on who you went with, but it could also mix up your deck quite a lot once you started unlocking them. The characters themselves were really fun to learn about, and see their little interactions between each run was nice. It really helped to build out the world around you and made me want to keep going each run to find out what was happening with these time loops and how our little crew was involved. During my runs, I found a couple of cards that ended up being favourites. Hand Cannon and Parry. Hand Cannon had saved me multiple times of how much damage it could do with its upgrades. But man did it feel satisfying destroying a boss with the parry dealing so much damage. It was really nice to get cards like this, because that feeling of building up power is something that's always really nice to get hold of in roguelikes. A small thing I liked about the combat was that you could easily stack things up like movement and shields to be used in later rounds. It made for certain fights and scenarios to be a little simpler, however I did end up thinking that my first loop was pretty easy. I was slightly worried that the game was going to continue like this, so given that I'd just inflated my ego with an easy run, that's when I saw you could unlock a ship by beating a loop in hard mode. So I thought to myself, well, it can't be that bad, can it? I got humbled pretty quick by the first boss. I did then see other comments saying that the first run does seem to be a little easier, and after I'd done some more normal runs, I did start to feel like that was the case for me as well once you start swapping out crew. When I did decide to start switching crew members up in the later runs, I realised quickly how much I missed my movement specialist. I was constantly watching enemies easily dodge me with no way of catching up to them, and then having zero way to get out of the way of certain things. It certainly made me change a lot about how I played that run, as I had to stack defense as much as possible with how much I was getting left out in the open. It certainly made me like the game a lot more, as I've played roguelikes before where changes are not really that impactful to gameplay, and it always ends up feeling a little samey. I would warn you, however, about picking a fight with the shopkeeper, for reasons. Nah. Well, I'm a bit screwed here, aren't I? I was indeed screwed. Even though it's a loop of playing out the same time period over and over again, and I did love that some of the enemies and encounters talk about this as you progress through, it would have been nice to have some different bosses each run maybe based on certain things. As currently I've seen the same bosses during my limited runs so far, and it would have been nice to shake up that part a little bit more, as I did like the bosses I'd already seen, and I would have loved to see some variations on this. I also had a run where I found a card that gave me extra max health if I defeated an enemy with it. I can tell you that run I felt like I was the end boss that time round, and man did it feel good. I do think this may be one of the best deck builders I've played, as it really just brings together so many great elements with a story infused within it, and it's a very strong recommendation to play from me. Ever wondered what a Scrabble roguelike deck builder would be like? No, me either, but now that I've seen it, it is a rather interesting idea. Words Can Kill was a deck builder that uses letter tiles to attack and defend. You would build up words with your hand of letter tiles, choosing if you wanted them to be for attack or defense. Each letter has a different value on how easy it is to make up words with, just like Scrabble. But some tiles can have other bonuses on them for being on a certain lane or where they're placed within a word. As you progress, you'd also be able to acquire equipment during the run which could change how certain letters or combos worked. Enemies were also able to add letters to your attack or defense board, which could really screw up your hard-made words. They could also lock you out of either attacking or blocking that turn and could destroy letters from your deck. You can clear the board if you're suddenly unable to make a word anymore, but I did find this action to be not very memorable, as it was just throwing a tile onto the battlefield. I forgot multiple times about it, and having a section clearly on the board would have been a nice improvement for it, like you do when you have debuffs on you. The mechanics of adding tiles to either the attack or defense also felt a little janky to me. You would drag them onto the section that you want, but after placing them you couldn't move them around within that area to shift within a word, and you'd have to press the back button to take it off the board again and then place it exactly where you wanted. It made it hard for me to be able to visualise some words, as it was such a hassle to keep putting tiles on and off the board. It would have been nice just to be able to drag words on and off instead of having a button for it. What was nice is that you could have a possible words list at the top of the screen, for us that have a bad time figuring out words. It could be turned on or off when starting a new run, but it also couldn't then be switched during one. And while I did find the word examples really helpful for myself, it did make the game feel far too easy. I tried on my second run not to have them, but the second character also had 2 letter pieces, and this is where my brain broke trying to figure out even the simplest of words. I think the second character was rather interesting however, but his multiple letter pieces and the ability to split one each turn made his gameplay feel a bit too slow to be enjoyable for me. Partway into my first run, I found a shield which really did make things nice and easy for me. It allowed me to just dump any letters into defense and they would still be valid. It saved me a bunch of times, but it did of course make things feel far too easy. But it also did make the game feel much more like a game at that point. I thought with the art style and the word building element of it, it could be a fun game to help kids learn words. But then the first real enemy swore at me, and I became not so sure about it after that. There is a censor option in the game, but I think it would have been nice just to not have these words at all, rather than censoring them. I think I really wanted to like this game due to its concept with the letter tiles. It certainly got a lot of potential for a certain kind of crowd, and the words element really did make it stand out to me. The tile modifiers were nice to see, and the equipment did look like it gave a decent amount of diversity for builds. But I think overall it was just lacking something for me. I really would have loved for it to be aimed more at learning words and perhaps adding descriptions to the provided words. It would have been kind of cool as I didn't really know some of them, but with how it is currently, it's not a particular deck builder I could recommend in its current state unless you really like word games or get it on offer. While editing, I happened to find Frostrain within the deck builders lists, so let's take a look at this train deck builder that has some interesting things to bring to the genre. The basic idea of the game is to build out your train as you travel towards the promised land through the cold and deadly environment. During this journey, you need to ensure that your passengers remain happy, otherwise it's game over. I had just blindly booted up this game without really reading about it, so even after completing the tutorial, I didn't really know what was actually happening for the first 10 minutes or so, as I was just watching my train go along and getting a lot of pop-ups with my super happy customers. It wasn't until I hit a zone that reduced my passengers' happiness really quickly that I saw what this game was going for. Survive. The train is constantly moving around the map in real time, so depending on where you set it to go, it can change drastically how well you'll fare. You'll lose more happiness the further out onto the map you manage to make it, so it's really a race against time to try and get better and better cards to build up your train. You can trash cards in your hand to earn more towards the next drone supply. These supplies are also acquired when you go through new locations, and they're how you get more cards. You then need to carefully select which one may help you in your current time need. The real-time element of the map was just really cool to see. You were able to look at what the impact of the future route was going to have on you, so you could try and plan and see if you were going to make it, or try and find some safer passage. If this may stress you out however a bit too much, you can also just pause the game to look around, which was handy to get your bearings on what was going on. To stop you from just going around in circles however, there's a storm rapidly catching up to you. And if you wait around too long and get caught in it, you can start to lose happiness at an alarmingly quick rate. I really like this mechanic to keep you moving forward and trying to balance between staying in some of the nicer zones and exploring to get more cards, and forcing you to move forward into the next unknown. If you had multiple types of the same cabooses, you could also earn bonuses like more speed or gaining extra cards. This was really interesting to see, as once I was caught in the storm during my first run, I was desperately trying to get more engine cards to increase my speed so I could get out of it. I was pretty unsuccessful. This was such a fresh experience for a deck builder for me, as while you didn't really build up a full deck and just had a hand of cards, the real-time nature of the game really brought something else to the table for me and made you question your decisions as they were happening. It's a free game, so it's certainly one I'd say you should check out, and I'd love to see more happen with this sort of concept. There we have 4 roguelike deck builder games you may not have heard of, and as we've seen, there are still a lot of interesting takes on the genre to see. So if you yourself have some that you may want to try, or perhaps a collection of games you've never heard of and think may not be for you, why not just try booting them up for an hour and see what you think? You never know what treasures you may find.